The cowboy's horse had been missing for 3 days. It returned with an injured Apache woman. He couldn't believe it. Watch till the end to discover how a simple decision reshaped fate in the wild desert. Would you have made the same choice? Subscribe for more powerful emotional stories that stay with you. The cowboy had never gone 3 days without his horse. Not once in all the years he had lived on the edge of the desert, surviving dust storms, long cattle drives, and lonely nights under an endless sky. That horse was more than an animal. It was his partner, his protection, his only constant companion in a land where one mistake could mean death. When the horse failed to return the first night, the cowboy told himself it would come back by morning. Horses wandered. That was normal. But when morning came and the corral was still empty, a quiet fear settled into his chest. He spent the entire second day searching. He followed hoofprints until the wind erased them. He rode along dry riverbeds and climbed rocky ridges, calling out until his voice cracked. Every shadow looked like movement. Every sound made his heart jump. By nightfall, exhaustion forced him to stop, but sleep would not come. The desert felt different without his horse, colder and more dangerous, as if it sensed his weakness. By the third day, hope began to fade. The sun burned hotter, and the silence felt heavy, almost accusing. The cowboy sat on the porch of his small ranch house as the light turned orange, accepting the thought that his horse might be gone forever, taken by predators, thieves or worse. He lowered his head, bracing himself for the loss. Then he heard it, a soft, familiar rhythm of hooves against dry earth. He looked up slowly, afraid his mind was playing tricks on him. Out of the fading light emerged his horse, walking carefully as if every step mattered. Relief surged through the cowboy, but it stopped just as quickly when he noticed something strange. The horse's head was lowered, its movements cautious, almost protective. As it stepped closer, the truth revealed itself. Draped across the saddle was a woman, an Apache, her clothes torn, her skin pale beneath dried blood. She was unconscious, barely breathing. The cowboy's heart pounded. His horse had not run away. It had gone somewhere for a reason. The cowboy stood frozen, caught between disbelief and fear. Helping her could bring deadly consequences. But as he met the steady, trusting gaze of his horse, he understood one thing clearly. This was no accident. The horse stood quietly in front of the ranch house, sides heaving from exhaustion, dust clinging to its coat like the marks of a long journey. The cowboy moved closer, his eyes fixed on the figure slumped across the saddle. She was an Apache woman, her dark hair matted with blood, her breathing shallow and uneven. One wrong move, one wrong decision, and his life could end before the sun rose again. For generations, men like him and people like her had been taught to fear each other. He reached out slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice, not to her but to the horse. Its ears twitched, but it did not move. Carefully, he untied the straps and caught her weight as her body slid into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that made his chest tighten. Her skin was cold despite the heat of the desert, and her wounds told a story of violence and flight. Deep cuts, bruises, and the marks of a hard fall. The cowboy hesitated at the door of his cabin. If anyone saw this, there would be questions, dangerous ones. Still, he stepped inside and laid her on his bed, the only bed he had. He fetched water, tearing cloth into strips with trembling hands. Each time she stirred, his heart jumped, expecting anger, fear, or a blade drawn in reflex. But she remained unconscious, caught somewhere between life and death. As he cleaned her wounds, his thoughts raced. He knew the Apache people would be searching for her. Warriors would come, and when they did, they would not ask for explanations. Helping her meant inviting that danger straight into his home. Yet leaving her outside would have been a death sentence. He had seen too much loss in the desert to turn away now. Hours passed. The sun disappeared, and darkness wrapped itself around the cabin. The wind howled, rattling the walls, making every sound feel like approaching footsteps. The cowboy kept watch, rifle nearby, but his eyes returned again and again to the woman's face. Beneath the dirt and pain, there was strength there, pride, humanity. Near midnight, her fingers twitched. She let out a soft, broken sound, somewhere between a breath and a cry. The cowboy leaned closer, his pulse racing. Slowly her eyes opened. They were filled with fear, confusion, and expectation of cruelty. Instead, she saw him stepping back, lowering his hands. And in that moment, both of them realized that trust, fragile and dangerous, had just been born. Morning light slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, pale and uncertain, as the cowboy stirred from a sleepless night. He had barely closed his eyes, spending the dark hours listening for movement outside and watching the woman rise and fall with each shallow breath. The desert was quiet now, but he knew that silence never lasted. When she shifted on the bed, he straightened immediately, tension flooding his body. She woke slowly, confusion clouding her face as she took in the strange surroundings. Her hand moved instinctively, searching for a weapon that was no longer there. Pain flashed across her features, and she let out a sharp breath, clutching her side. The cowboy raised his hands at once and took a step back, making himself smaller, less threatening. He spoke softly, though he knew she might not understand his words. The tone was what mattered. Her eyes locked onto his, dark and alert, despite her weakness. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air felt heavy, charged with years of hatred and fear neither of them had personally chosen, yet both carried. She expected rope around her wrists or cold steel at her throat. That was how stories like this were supposed to go. Instead, she noticed the clean bandages, the water set within her reach, and the rifle leaning untouched against the far wall. Confusion replaced fear. She tried to sit up, failed, and winced in pain. The cowboy stepped forward just enough to steady her, then immediately pulled back again, careful not to cross a line. Through broken gestures and a few shared words, understanding began to form. He pointed to her wounds, then to the door, and shook his head, warning her not to move yet. She studied his face, searching for lies, but found only exhaustion and concern. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. The hours that followed were quiet but tense. He brought her water and thin broth, keeping his distance, always moving slowly so she could see his intentions. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and with it came his growing fear. Every distant sound made him pause. A snapped twig, a bird taking flight. He knew her people would be looking for her, and when they found the trail leading here, there would be no easy explanations. As the day wore on, her strength returned bit by bit. She watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, taking in the care with which he treated her, the way he never once touched her without permission. Something shifted inside her. The enemy she had been taught to expect did not exist here. By sunset, she spoke his language well enough to make one thing clear. "You saved me." The cowboy met her gaze, fully aware of the danger still ahead. "Yes," he said quietly, "and I would do it again." The sound came just after dawn, low voices carried by the wind, the unmistakable rhythm of many footsteps moving with purpose. The cowboy felt it before he fully heard it, a tightening in his chest that told him the moment he had been dreading had arrived. He stepped outside slowly, the cool morning air brushing against his face, and scanned the horizon. Figures appeared at the edge of the land, emerging from the desert like shadows given form. Apache warriors, armed, focused, and unafraid. Behind him, the woman stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. She was still weak, but her eyes were sharp now. She recognized her people instantly. The cowboy took a breath and placed himself between her and the approaching men, not raising his rifle, not reaching for a weapon at all. He stood with empty hands, knowing that any sign of fear or aggression could end his life in seconds. The warriors closed in, forming a wide circle around the ranch. Their faces were hard, carved by loss and years of conflict. Words were exchanged in a language the cowboy did not understand, sharp and urgent. He felt the weight of their stares, measuring him, judging him. He had no defense except the truth, and in that moment, he wondered if truth would be enough. Before he could speak, the woman stepped forward. Pain crossed her face, but her voice was steady. She spoke to them with strength, pointing first to her wounds, then to the cabin, and finally to the man standing beside her. The desert fell silent as her story unfolded. She told them how she had fallen, how death had been close, and how this cowboy, an enemy by blood and history, had chosen compassion over fear. The warriors listened. One by one their expressions changed. The anger did not vanish, but it softened, reshaped by something older and deeper than hatred, honor. An elder stepped forward and studied the cowboy carefully. After a long moment he nodded. Weapons were lowered. The circle opened. The woman turned to the cowboy, her eyes filled with gratitude. Without ceremony, one of the warriors placed a hand over his heart in a gesture of respect. The message was clear. No harm would come to him. As the Apache people helped the woman mount her horse, the cowboy realized something had shifted forever. In a land built on violence and fear, a single act of kindness had redrawn the lines between enemies. When the dust finally settled and silence returned, the cowboy stood alone once more, but he was no longer unprotected.